friends. I just wanted to say hi and let you all know that you're doing a great job out there. This has been a stressful time for everyone. We've never done this, and I really appreciate all the families and everyone getting back to me when you can. I'd like to say hi to some friends before we get started. I'd like to say hi to Aurora, Elena, Elizabeth, Fiona, Gabrielle, Jelson, Haley, Israela, James, Lucas, Madalena, Naima, Nils, Olivia, Omar, Saba, Salma, Yafate, and Samau. You're all doing a great job, so keep it up. Please listen to your parents. Okay. At the end of chapter 9, Cousin Daryl and Tom are in some trouble. Well, Tom, Cousin Daryl said, that was an unexpected adventure. Are you all right? Tom didn't answer. He was pointing to a pair of yellow eyes staring at them from under the brush. Chapter 10. Meanwhile, at the Longs' house, the Buttons were greeting the Littles. Mrs. Button came to the door first. She had a pretty round face, and her eyes looked like shiny black buttons. Oh, it's the Well, 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 Mr. Button's voice boomed behind her. It's the Littles. What a wonderful visit. What wonderful people, the Littles. The tiny man's chubby red face was smiling and smiling. He hugged the woman and gave the men strong handshakes. Mrs. Button spotted Delicate, and this is Delicate. Mr. Button didn't let his wife finish. And here's Miss Delicate, he said, the beautiful bride-to-be. Della, the last time we saw you, Mr. Button went on, you weren't any bigger than dear little Lucy Little. He patted Lucy on the head. She ducked out from under his hand. Now she's going to be married, said Mrs. Button. And now you're going to be married, said Mr. Button. My, that's wonderful, and you're going to be married to the fellow who is the salt of the earth, Daryl Little. Mrs. Button looked around. Daryl isn't with you. Daryl isn't with you, Mr. Button said. He smiled with a big smile. We can't have a wedding without the bridegroom, can we? Where is the lucky lad? Mr. Little explained why Cousin Daryl and Tom were late. Oh, those awful cats, Mrs. Button said. Well, I'm sure Daryl and Tom can handle them. Then she smiled. While we're waiting for the boys, you can start breakfast. Yes, Mr. Button broke in. Mrs. Button had prepared a delicious breakfast of leftovers. Let's not keep Mrs. Button waiting, folks. He winked at Mr. Little. I can see why she has a temper, Uncle Pete whispered Granny Little. They walked toward the kitchen. Old Button won't let his wife finish a sentence. During breakfast, everyone watched baby Betsy. Mrs. Little sat her up in a high chair that the Buttons kept for visiting children. They had no children of their own. She was feeding her a slice of banana and a couple cornflakes. She's adorable, said Mrs. Button. Adorable, echoed Mr. Button. Uncle Pete groaned. Baby Betsy grabbed the spoon out of her mother's hand and jerked it. Some of the banana and cornflakes landed on Uncle Pete's shirt. Isn't she a smart one, said Uncle Pete. She knows we're talking about her. Lucy Little jumped out of her chair. She ran over and kissed baby Betsy, and then she ran back to her chair. Lucy, said Granny Little, where did you get all that energy? Where are those boys, Mrs. Little said. They should be here by now. Yes, they should, Mr. Little said. The men decided to go look for them. Mr. Little, Mr. Button, and Uncle Pete left the Longs' house by the secret door. It was light now. The sun made long shadows in the yard. Mr. Little had found a long piece of string at the bush where Cousin Daryl had tied the balloon. Mr. Little held the end of the string in his hand and he looked at the sky. The balloon is gone, he said. Something went wrong. I should have stayed with them, Uncle Pete said. Look, all's well that ends well, Mr. Button shouted. He pointed to the edge of the Longs' yard. Well, I'll be, Uncle Pete said. Tom and Daryl, Mr. Little called. Thank heavens you're safe. The three tiny men ran across the yard. Hildy, the big cat, walked slowly in their direction. She was carrying the two cousins on her back. They were laughing and cheering. Cousin Daryl explained what had happened to them, and finally we landed right in front of two scary yellow eyes, he said. That turned out to belong to our old friend Hildy. Some luck, Uncle Pete said. Some cat, said Tom. It was almost time for the wedding. Everybody gathered in the Buttons' living room to make plans. They were wearing their finest clothes. Della was beautiful in her white, ruffled wedding dress. She carried one pink rosebud, and her cheeks were pinker than rose. Lucy, her flower girl, carried an acorn cap filled with 3 violets. They matched her blouse made of French silk ribbon. Mrs. Little, the matron of honor, wore a blue linen dress made from one of Granny Big's handkerchiefs, and Granny Little wore a yellow flowered dress made from the hat band of Mrs. Big's last year's Easter hat. Mrs. Button had on tan lace dress. She had made it from a lace collar that Mrs. Long had thrown away. Mr. Little explained how tiny people took part in the wedding ceremony. Della and Darrell must stand as close to the big bride and groom as they can get. And of course, the best man and the matron of honor must be with them, he said. The rest of the tiny people may stand near these 4 if possible. If not possible, they may watch from a safe place in the room. Why did Della and Darrell have to stand so close to the big people? Tom said. First, this is a custom, Tom, Mr. Little said, and second, they'll be sure to hear the words when the minister says, "Do you, Veralong, take this man, Sam Tower, to be your husband?" At the same time, Della must say, "I, Delicate, take this man, Darrell Little, to be my husband." Isn't it beautiful? Mrs. Little said. It's important, Mr. Little went on, for Della to speak loud enough for Darrell and the rest of us to hear her, but soft enough so the big people don't hear her. It's quite a trick. Do you have a place picked out for us to stand, Mr. Button? Della said. I'm dying to see it. Is it very near the big people? Mr. Button reached over and took Della's hand. Your wedding will be held in the Longs' living room, he said, and I have a nifty spot in mind for you. I think you'll love it. Mr. Little looked at the watch over the fireplace. We have about half an hour before the wedding begins. Shouldn't we get to our places now? Follow me, Mr. Button said. Let's see what's happening in the Longs' living room. Tom whispered to Lucy. I almost forgot. We have to move fast. We still don't have the ring. Everybody left the apartment and hurried down the wall passageway to the Longs' living room. Tom and Lucy followed part of the way. When no one was looking, the 2 children turned off for Mrs. Long's bedroom. I wonder what's going to happen. Chapter 12. Maybe you can make a prediction and tell someone in your family what you think is going to happen next. Hope you're all doing well, and I'll see you soon. Bye-bye.